Without further ado, I'd like to introduce our first speaker, who's really having one heck of a year. Scott Hagedorn is the Chief Executive Officer of Hearts and Science, and he's also from Florida. He said backstage that he only has one look for you Zoolander fans. Under Scott's leadership, Hearts and Science landed the 2 largest advertisers in the United States in its first 8 months, an accomplishment that earned Breakthrough Agency of the Year and Media Agency Executive of the Year accolades from Adweek, among a number of other accolades and awards this year. Prior to launching Hearts and Science in 2016, Scott was the founding CEO of Vanelect. To begin our program, please welcome me in inviting Scott Hagedorn to the stage.
Apparently my Zoolander joke didn't hit. I got a mic, thanks. I was trying to come up with something self-deprecating. I usually go with a bald joke, but anyway. So, happy Halloween, everybody. I look forward to talking to you guys this morning about kind of where we are as marketers. I feel like our industry right now is in a bit of a Bermuda Triangle. On the one hand, we have pretty big supply and demand issues going on with television at one point of the Bermuda Triangle. At another point of the Bermuda Triangle, we have some issues with the syndicated data that a lot of the people in industry use to actually plan. And then on the other part of it, we have some issues with brand safety and digital. And how we help clients, marketers get through that triangle is sort of the big challenge that we're dealing with today. So, no surprise, year over year, if you look at the last 5 years or so, we've had double-digit increases in inflation in television while the audiences are leaving. Look no further than the Emmys to understand that, where HBO, Netflix, Hulu, Amazon now dominate the Emmys, and the networks are starting to lose out on that net attention, on people actually paying attention to their programming. And you'd think that more money was actually going into digital, that money would be leaving television and going into digital, but it hasn't happened. And one of the things we wanted to study a little bit at Hearts was, why isn't that happening? So we did about a 1,500-person study of Gen X and millennials. And what we did is we mapped their consumption and their diary, their consumption habits, and then mapped it against actually where they consume content, and then went a little bit further and started working with the publishing community to understand technology adoption of SDKs that are used to track actually how people consume content on mobile devices and an app. And what we found is there's a pretty big gap. The technology to track in-app and on mobile and on OTT hasn't been adopted by the industry yet. And we found that about 47% of Gen Xers and millennials live outside of the syndicated data that we use to actually plan. It accounts for about 66% of all video consumption. So there's a big bias for clients and for the tools that we actually use as students in the industry to drive into more television. And that's very dangerous because the audiences aren't effectively there anymore. One of the other things we looked at was, have we really cracked the code on how to market on digital and using digital? You know, right now you start to hear Facebook saying that the sweet spot is between 2 and 6 seconds, and it only takes 30 milliseconds for somebody to recognize an image. And that's because we're trying to force fit television into digital. We looked at it, and what we found is that people are generally, this is no surprise, okay with television ads on television, that they are really okay with native ads, with ads that have been form fit. This isn't a triple lift endorsement, but ads that have been form fit into actually the content they appear in. But they are not good with Force 15s, with pre-rolls, with mid-rolls. We as an industry need to think about bringing user experience design into how we build content. We need to think about apps versus ads. And it's, if you look, there's a really great podcast by somebody named Tristan Harris that's conducted by Sam Harris. And Tristan used to be the head of user experience design ethics for Google, and apps are essentially made to be continuously validating you and made to be addictive. And if you think about apps and your relationship with apps, they're utilities. They are things that you use to get stuff. There's almost like Maslow's hierarchy of needs has been flipped a little bit, and now apps are filling that. If you need food, if you need a ride, if you need companionships, apps, apps, apps. So if we're going to put marketing in those apps, we have to we have to basically answer the bell on how strong those apps can be and what they can do and what they mean for the consumers. So if we're going to advertise in mobile in an app where people are consuming most of their content, we have to think about user experience design. Now, the final thing I want to talk about a little bit is brand safety. I think maybe the most dangerous thing that's happened in the programmatic era is that we've started to divorce content from context.
Sean, you wanna go see Bad Guys?
Yeah.
What's Bad Guys say?
No? What, you afraid of Donald Trump?
Yeah, get him! It's fake. No, no. No, no, no. Oh, I feel bad.
Are you in the club?
What would happen when we shot our stuff with guns?
Now, you might be wondering what the hell was that? That was all premium video that was classified as parents, kids, or family. That's what happens when we buy premium video programmatically and activate it. Imagine if your client's ads were running in front of that. So in the study, one of the things we looked at was the Net Promoter Score question. When your brands or when your ads appear next to questionable content, are you more or less likely to buy, likely to recommend? Does it have an effect on brand equity? Does it have a long-term damaging effect potentially? And some of the major platforms now say that, you know, by and large, consumers, they know that when a brand appears next to something that's questionable, derogatory, hateful, that it's not the brand's fault. They didn't know where they were going to show up. They just showed up next to the content. But nobody's asked the second question, which is, are you more or less likely to buy? So I'll tell you what the answer is. 70% of the time, consumers are less likely to recommend, buy, act when branded content, when a client's ads appear next to something like that. And 70% of the time, the long-term brand equity is damaged. It's been tarnished. So context really matters. It matters a lot. And if this little TED-like talk is anything, it's an appeal to we've got to bring content and context back together, and that we have to be cognizant that we could actually be driving negative reach. We could be using clients' ad dollars to make consumers less likely to buy if we're not careful. So thanks. Happy Halloween.